But as I said, tonight is a special opening. Since we can't do it, unfortunately, in the gallery all together, we are doing it virtually tonight, the opening of Rob Carter Cultured Lands. And I'm very excited to host tonight Rob Carter himself and Lee Stoetzel, our partner in this adventure. I will first give a short introduction about the exhibition. Then I will let you will say a couple of words about the artist and Lee. And afterwards, Rob will share his screen and tell a little bit about his work in general before we dive into our conversation and Q&A about his work and about this exhibition and specifically. So please feel free, as I said, ask questions in the chat, and we will answer them right on the spot or afterwards after a couple of first initial questions. So this exhibition, Cultured Lands, came out of a conversation initially. Here I'm sharing a couple of first impressions from the Schuylkill Center, how we installed it, and came out of a conversation with Lee Stoetzel. And when we were talking about how the Schuylkill Center and the collection could maybe work together. And I told him also about our programming this year and what I'm hoping to do as an annual topic, what I'm calling restoring connections. And this kind of idea for restoring connections is taking human perspective in a different way onto the natural environment. So I'm very interested in the relationships we are having with than humans having with their surroundings in the middle of the pandemic. Our first show in this year was a community show where we had nature encounters and invited our community to share their nature encounters during the pandemic. And this show was in reaction to that, like how can we live with our lands and how can we rethink the development and the changes in our lands. So Lee came back to me and had this idea for Rob's work, and then they have multiple pieces in their collection. So we developed Cultured Lands together. And we realized this is almost like an invitation for a dialogue about the transformation of soil and the transformation of land into farmland, but also metropolises that come out of it. What we are featuring in our gallery is this speed up animation work Metropolis. Then for me builds a bridge from the urban development dreams of the past to today's recognition of irreversible human-made influences in the area of the Anthropocene. It seems almost like a question that Rob is asking here. How do we want to live with nature in the future? And maybe Rob wants to answer that question later. On the other side of the exhibition, we are also showing, we are presenting new work by Rob, a recent work that he called Plant Writing, and an artistic experiment here on that side, an artistic experiment with genetically modified and highly processed soybeans, one of the most valuable US agriculture export. And I was really interested in that work because I felt like it fascinated me and the way of thinking about it. How can we, if we would change our perspective from our human-centered idea into nature, and how if we want to understand how nature is thinking. And I really like this shift from us to them, from us to nature, what I was really interested in his work. So he's almost asking or speculating about the question, how can humans, nature, an insightful and empathic relationship to the natural environment? Rob to like give you a little bit background about him, and some of you know him personally, which is very wonderful. And you joined us. Rob is a Richmond-based artist born in the UK. He makes multidisciplinary artworks which concern our contemporary understanding of politics, of plants, and the environment through the lens of history. His installations, time-lapse videos, photographic works analyze historical developments in botany, plant science, plant consciousness, and how humanity underestimates plants' predominance and influence. Carter received his BFA from the Ruskin School of Fine Arts at Oxford University, and later received an MFA in studio art from Hunter College in New York. He has shown very internationally, really from San Francisco to New York, from Madrid to Japan. The other conversation partner tonight is Lee Stoetzel, he is an artist, curator, and the director of the West Collection in Oaks, Pennsylvania. As an artist curator, the West Collection, he has at the West Collection contributed over 3,000 works and to contribute into the over 700 artists into the collection. Lee graduated from the SMU in Dallas with a studio in fine arts, and he has previously worked for art dealers in Los Angeles and New York. So please welcome with me now our two speakers. And first I would like you, Rob, to share your screen and tell us a little bit more about your practice. So that was the last.
Great, thank you. Okay, let's see, 1 second. All right, you see that? Okay, you see a tent. Let me just get this away. So yeah, thank you. Hi, everyone. And thanks so much for everyone coming. It's great to see so many familiar faces and not familiar faces as well. So I'm just going to give you, just a brief rundown of a few of my projects over the years. As Tina described, my main focus is the natural world, and I'm interested in exploring our relationship to it through cultural and scientific and historical ideas over the years. So this video, which is in the show titled Plant Writing, it documents the growth and movement of soybean plants over the course of multiple days. Time-lapse photography also captures my actions as I interact with the plant. I could be seen entering the space every 15 minutes to chart the plant's movement over using an analog methodology, which was employed by Charles Darwin. In this amazing book, The Power of Movement in Plants in 1880. So this project, the drawings and the video, this is very much the sort of starting point. These drawings that I saw and read about in this book. So it's an approximation of enlarged movement, which is rendered digitally here, showing the results from 3 angles and forming lines as if drawn by the plants themselves. The apparatus forms a kind of pseudo-scientific experiment, since the 2 soybean plants came from very different seeds. One is cultivated organic and the other is genetically modified and patented. So my question was, could this form of plant writing reveal possible differences between the 2 specimens? Soybeans are the most valuable architectural export in the United States, but like many processed crops, our relationship to the plant is often very remote. This video charts a kind of dance between plants and humans, that one that we like to think we understand and control. So the final part of this process was a return to more traditional forms of art making and a series of ink on paper paintings. These are actually the first paintings, like with a brush, that I've made since 2002, I guess. So it's a bit of a change up. I harvested the leaves of the documented soy plants in the video and then pulverized them and made inks with each plant. So as a result, the movement of the seedlings, whether they're organic or genetically modified, is represented by painting with their, chlorophyll, their vital pigment. So here's Metropolis. It's interesting. This video, this exhibition has a select group of work that actually span 14 years of work. And it's really interesting to bring older works together with new and see how they connect or disconnect. With this video, Metropolis from 2008, the environmental themes remain, and the architectural qualities of the soy drawings clearly connect with this and the other animations I've made. This video, which has been loaned by the West Collection, thank you, Lee, for the show, describes in cut paper stop motion animation the evolution of the city of Charlotte in North Carolina from a Catawba trading path, which is kind of like, can be described as maybe the beginnings of the city, to the aggressive modern development that has, exists today and also beyond. Tina, tell me if I'm going on too long.
Surely.
So more recent work represents a direct response to our escalating climate crisis. And I often work around different bodies of work involving different plants. So in the past, I've done work around poppies, but this time I chose tobacco as my subject, especially because Virginia really owes its existence to Nicotiana tabacum. And it's pretty doubtful that the early colony would have survived without the cash crop. So all these images I'm about to show were part of an exhibit in Richmond titled Smokescreen at the High Point Gallery. I used tobacco as an allegory for our addiction to fossil fuels and the political and marketing tactics employed by multinationals who try to keep us hooked on essentially, suicidal products, or at least ones that are not good for us. The success of tobacco continues to be maintained by obfuscation regarding the health impacts on users, and this continues especially in developing countries. Addiction still makes nicotine a pretty amazing product for big business. These photographs describe a story of tobacco from seed to cigarette. Here are the top 5 tobacco producing countries, represented as macro globes made from seeds, which, tobacco seeds, if you've never seen one, are really the size of a speck of dust. A tiny seed with a great deal of power. The idea was to visually grapple with human brain chemistry, where we are so seduced by short-term gratification that death and destruction can be overlooked until tomorrow. The parallels between nicotine addiction and consumption, mostly in the form of fossil fuels, are nothing new, but they continue to be a powerful analogy for our current climate crisis, as well as, the malicious efforts of the recent Trump administration to take our environmental policy back to pre-Nixon times. Many of the photographs are tied together by the beguiling quality of smoke. In some images, the smoke acts as a physical smokescreen, separating us from the marketing logos of oil companies and the historical figures that help form them. In this case, it's Buck Duke. And in others, I focus on single-use plastic containers, mostly unrecycled petroleum product. In our strange times of the pandemic, the skies may have cleared a little bit, but the use of single-use plastics is skyrocketing. One other subject of this show, I'm wrapping up now, is the magnificent Manduca sexta, also known as the tobacco hornworm. It's a pretty amazing caterpillar that is able to metabolize nicotine and use it for defense. And the fact that it has a voracious appetite, excretes perfect grenade-shaped feces and makes it hard to tell its head from its rear, for me, made it the perfect metaphor for our own consumption. And finally, the sort of on the side room of the exhibition was a video installation. And it saw this creature incessantly munching constantly, but to the sound of a whispered computer voice, I recorded reading the entire 1,500-page fourth National Climate Assessment. So there you go. I hope that gives you an idea of a few older pieces and what I've been working on most recently.
Thank you, Rob, for sharing these
no problem.
Amazing works. So I would like to invite everybody to join into the conversation if you like. Me, Rob, and Lee will start to talk a little bit about the show and about Rob's artwork. I do have a couple of questions prepared, but I'm would love to hear what everybody else is thinking. Happy to share my screen again so that we can look at a couple of images from the gallery.
Sounds good.
Rob, it's amazing to see all that new work, because I feel like, we're going back in time. You said 14 years or something to Metropolis.
Mm-hmm.
But I love how you deal with science and politics and crossover and to history and beauty and botany. I mean, that's what got us hooked originally with the animations, I believe, like Metropolis. And but it's great to see that new work, and it looks awesome.
Well, thanks,
yeah.
Lee.
Lee, would you mind speaking a little bit more about the collection and how Rob's work came into it? Like already 2008, so
yeah,
pretty early.
Rob and Paige work together. So Paige West is our owner, collector, founder, and really the curator. And my job has always been to kind of keep things organized on the collection side. But so we've known Rob a long time. But when he started making that series of animations around the time of like This England and Metropolis, and he was kind of doing these crazy desktop sort of animations, building models and putting sound to them, and taking us from raw land to current day cities, and showing us how we ruin everything. We got hooked, and we were very excited by that work, and couldn't wait to show it to people who work in a big office building in the suburbs. And so that's the kind of programming that we do at the collection, and that Paige has always been interested in, is trying to, in a way, expose people to a bigger picture, or put challenging work in that environment. So Rob, of course, fit the bill very well.
Yeah, I like what you said, like the ruination of the world. I think that was something that really hooked me when we talked about this work, because it also has the other side of the ruination of like, is there hope? And in a conversation with Rob, I always had the feeling like how he's explaining it and how he's like also developing these works, there is hope. There is hope that we can change something, that we can learn from it, right?
And Rob is just so relevant today, not because of climate change or whatever, but like here we are in a pandemic, global pandemic that mimics, you know, Spanish flu from 100 years ago, and we can't learn to wear a mask, you know, 100 years later. And Rob's work always reminds us of the previous stories. So his history is always built on the lessons that we didn't learn the first time, which is what I think I'm so drawn to you.
Thank you. That's perfect. Yes, exactly.
So Rob, how did you get interested in that kind of area, to work with plants, the history, the science, the history of science in certain ways?
Yeah, I've always been interested in history, and so that, you know, has always been an ongoing thing. And I think I got that from my father. He used to drag us around castles and churches when we went on summer holidays and stuff like that. But the thing that changed, I think, was that I moved to New York in 2000 to do my master's. And architecture, you know, I'd never lived in a city like New York, and I guess it must have had a pretty profound effect on me. I mean, I can't help, I've never felt there was any clear connection between the World Trade Center and my work, but there is something weird about the Metropolis and the skyscrapers that go up, not down. But certainly being there changed my understanding of architecture, I think, from, you know, I mean, anyone who goes to New York for the first time, it's like, whoa, this is crazy. And then just the lack of plant life in my existence there prompted me to start playing with them. And I was also making animations. And the wonderful thing about plants is, to our experience, if you make a time lapse, they animate themselves, which seemed like a really convenient thing, much easier. Let them do it. And the results are often, you know, fascinating and surprising. So that was sort of, you know, around 2004 or 5, and it's kind of continued ever since as these topics become more and more relevant.
Yeah, I think like what I found really interesting also with this example that it's, or with Metropolis, that it's like one example of many especially along the East Coast, and you have, and that's why I went back to this image, because I included also this like maps from the early 18th century, like just after, like a couple of decades after William Penn got the land Pennsylvania, and like also developed Pennsylvania. And we, as the Schuylkill Center, are here on that map, also located, and it's already developed into these farmlands, into these like divided up situations. And the Schuylkill Center was, until the 60s, the 1960s, farmland, and now we are a site that is under conservation ease. So I think that's also like, how can we rethink what urban development means, and how we can integrate the plants and the wildlife and the nature into these like urban designs and urban futures. I think that what made me also think a lot about Metropolis as, yes, ruination of the world, and but also the hope that we are actually trying to understand and trying to change our habits. And so I was like actually wondering a little bit if you could tell us more, Rob, about your explorations in these like urban landscapes, and you're working on a new project also that like develops into urban landscapes.
Yeah, I mean, it's been an interest for a while. I think this history has been learning more and more history since I came to the States has been fascinating. I think, I mean, I came to the States as kind of I was an idiot, really. I didn't know anything. I was brought up in a small C conservative bubble in some ways. And so, you know, at every step of the way, I learned more, I became more and more fascinated with American history, and then consequently British history, and you know, the terrible wrongs that have occurred over centuries, perpetrated by you know, a great deal of white people who you know, probably are my ancestors. So, but this idea of moving and then being like being in between being an immigrant and understanding what your land is, or trying to understand why people feel so attached to it in certain ways was something that was interesting to me. And so whenever I like travel, as you say, I mean, the Charlotte video could easily be made about Atlanta or a number of other cities. But when I travel, I'm like always keen to find out what happened here, you know, before, what formed this landscape, whether it's an urban landscape, a volcano, or whatever. So, and as you mentioned, the newer work, I'm trying to kind of get into the idea of our arrogance of trying to make land and hold back the sea. So I'm working with these with the idea of riprap, which is basically rubble that usually gets thrown in the sea to create land and keep the waters at bay. But we're basically throwing trash in the ocean in order to, you know, try and stop erosion. It's not going to work ultimately. But there are also some very interesting riprap designs, which are quite kind of architectural and beautiful. So I'm working with those. So so this idea of trying to create new land where there was none before, expand our own lands, meanwhile creating, you know, lots of emissions. That means sea levels rising, and therefore we're losing lands. This kind of absurdity and this cycle is something that like is always interesting to me. I'm not sure whether I answered your question properly, but
No, I totally agree. What I think is interesting about that, it's always like our human perspective. Like it's this, we have almost embraced our destiny into the Anthropocene. But I think what the show also, why I was so interested in also showing your soil drawings and the plant writing video, because what I said earlier, it like changes exactly the perspective and tries to like understand it from the other side, as if we would like try to listen to animals and like try to understand what they are saying. They're trying to understand what plants are saying, so that we could learn from them. So I was like also wondering a little bit, there's like, on the one hand, this is like, how can we like urbanize landscapes and how we can alter landscapes, and from a very human size perspective. And then you're going into the other direction, like looking at plants from like how could we understand them differently to also change our behavior in certain ways. So I was wondering a little bit if you can tell us a little bit more about that process and how you got interested in like looking at these plants so scientifically also.
Right. Well, definitely pseudoscientifically. I mean, I think that's, I'm interested in that kind of like weird aesthetic line between setting up kind of the apparatus that is somewhat sort of scientific, but at the end of the day, I'm just an artist, and I'm observing. But then, you know, to some extent, that is exactly what scientists do. I'm just, yeah, maybe a 19th century scientist, because I don't know anything about, I don't know, centrifuges and whatever. But yeah, I mean, with the soy plants, I wanted to create a situation where I've made a couple of pieces of work which sort of look at plant time and the way we experience plant time. But with this video, I wanted to actually include myself, and even though clearly I've set them up and I've created this artificial environment for them to grow and for me to document their movement, I made a pact with them to work with them, which involved, between 24 and 36 hours straight, me coming and marking a new plot point in 3 different positions every 15 minutes, all night. It became like, I don't have children, but I imagine it's like having a newborn. You can't, there's no time, you might grab, 5 minutes sleep. And so after a certain time, as I was like going in and marking the points and I'm like dead tired and, hoping I don't knock the camera over, the idea is perhaps that who is kind of controlling who, essentially. Like am I documenting the plants, or are they kind of manipulating me in a way, moving me around the room and documenting me in some way? So, and to kind of have us in that same plant space and time zone, if that makes sense. What was I going to say? I had another follow-up to that.
So it's very, like, your process is very structured, almost pedantic.
Yes,
like what you said, like it's a dance, but it in certain ways is a performance that you're having with the plants together,
right.
on a very closed setup.
Exactly. Right? Yeah. And it became, sort of had to be kind of obsessed with them, and I'm also ending up with these drawings, this mark making, which I'm then going to make into what you see in front of you. And so I'm willing them to behave, because if they move too much, they're going to go off. I have a certain range of motion that I can record, but if they start moving too much, then they'll fly off the side, and I won't be able to mark it, and the experiment will sort of have to be reset. So there's this constant like stress about, okay, yeah, so it's going right. I can predict where this might go next, and then something crazy happens, and it's like all bets are off. But that's part of the kind of, fun of it. It's not predictable.
But it's almost like you want to control them again, right? You're trying.
Well,
to control.
Yes, exactly. I try. I'm resisting that, but but naturally, as a human, it's sort of inevitable that we want to. We grow. I'm growing some vegetables at the moment, and that's great and interesting to watch them grow, but it's equally extremely frustrating. I enjoy that kind of freedom that they have, but not when they don't do what I want them to do. And that's been something that's been a theme for a number of years with weeds. Did a project with kudzu, which is fantastically fast moving. And I love this sort of irony of, kudzu is an amazing plant. It's one of the most amazing plants in the world. You can eat it. It can withstand, a extreme amount of time of being like just a seed in the ground. It grows faster than most things. You can see it grow. You can see it move if you look closely enough. And yet we hate it because it came back and bit us in the ass, because we tried to use it for what we wanted, and then it was like, okay, great. And so that kind of like dichotomy of human, love, hate, control, I think is just endlessly fascinating.
What about for you, Rob? When you're like setting out to, in a way, you're using the plants to prove a point, maybe, or build a theme, let's say, for an exhibition. what about when you learn that they won't do what you want? Or are there stories where you learn it's actually the reverse? I mean, one thing, and if you would just speak to also GMOs for a second, because that's interesting to me. Like, what is the result of the engineered plant versus the organic? Or
Yeah, well, there was, as I said, it's pseudoscientific. So the conclusions are, you know, it's a very small sample size. So I think there were some differences, but I didn't really, going into it, I didn't think there would be an obvious sort of difference. But I think that the GMO plants grew better, a little bit better, more controlled movement and that sort of thing. So that kind of makes sense. But I wanted to set up this kind of hypothesis of, you know, we compare all these things, you know, say between something that's man-made and natural. But ultimately, once it's done, what is the difference to the actual plant itself when it comes to the way it kind of expresses itself or grows, and how that looks maybe aesthetically. So it wasn't, yeah, I wasn't expecting any kind of answer. And also, it's not something I'm very, I've talked to lots of scientists, and I don't think that there's particularly a problem with GMO plants within reason. We've been cultivating and mucking about with plant species for hundreds of years, and this is nothing. This is actually, in its simplest form, is not necessarily that big a deal. It's really about who owns those ideas and those plants, because before grafting a tree, there was no patent on that. But now it's then it becomes a much more kind of corporate dialogue about who owns nature, who has control over the farmers, and what are they doing that is not in our best interest that we don't know about. We could talk about regulation, but that's not.
Well, no, it's just interesting because of the impact, right? There's so many environmental, I mean, that's a whole other show, but I've just saw, you know, I think the GMO debate is interesting, and certainly interesting in Europe and the regulations around it. And
yeah, so that's very much about transparency. I mean, I think they've been a little fearful, but I think probably comes down to, I could say, well, they have developed some amazing new rice varieties that grow in drier climates, and that may save millions of lives as the climate warms. But then you could say, well, what next? So maybe just everyone shouldn't be living in these drier areas. So there's a bit of a chicken and egg thing there, but I think that genetically modified plants have the power to mitigate some of the most catastrophic effects of climate change. I just know that the large multinational corporations are not really thinking about that. It's really just about tying people in and making a lot of money. And that's very, very frustrating. And then, of course, you know, they also are ready for synthetic fertilizers, which come from fossil fuels. This is the nightmare, basically. So there is the potential for genetically modified plants that do not require synthetic fertilizers, and you know, can be, I guess, put towards a really genuinely sustainable future, I would say. But I don't know that that's happening right now.
Yeah, it's also always a question of, like, what you said earlier, of the benefit and who is benefiting from it, and like who we want also to benefit from it. It's not like the plants itself is not the evil. It's like a lot of times like how we are using it for something else and how we ourselves want to use it for
Right.
ourselves.
Exactly.
Lee, I was actually wondering if you want to speak also, are there other works in the collection that like touch on these topics and like Rob is raising his work?
Certainly there are, and there is an interest in climate change, or let's say solutions, critique, to show the devastation and try to give a picture that way. But I think Rob has a unique way of, I guess because it's video, or a lot of it's video, he can really narrate you through, and sort of take you through a number of ideas where the still image, you know, it's tougher. So I've always respected so much the early Carter pieces that we have, that the video takes you on this journey and this long timeline, and sort of shows you, gives you this lesson in a sense. So yeah, there are a lot of artists, I mean, that we've collected, but not so many coming to mind right on this topic. I mean, with plants specifically. I mean, we have plenty of artists who have shown flooding, or shown you know, all sorts of natural disasters, or you know, trash in rivers, or you know, any number of things. But what I like about Rob is that he's getting into the problem and sort of monkeying around with it, and
Yeah.
so that's cool.
And you both, do you see that in the next couple of years, or do you see there is a momentum almost for environmental topics and that are coming up even more during the pandemic or with the pandemic?
I mean, yes, I mean, I think so. I mean, it's tricky though. I mean, because it's like, you know, and I think this is a good point to maybe kind of try to tease apart art and activism. And my work, although I'm keen to focus a little bit more on climate justice, my work tends to be a little more, well, you could say it's safe, but you could also say more analytical and scientific, and not get bogged down with, you know, climate protests, because I'm not sure this is a very effective way of, you know, it's a way of having a detailed conversation about environment, plants, recent science, which I'm particularly interested in terms of plant intelligence. But in terms of, you know, people coming to see this show, I mean, I think they're probably, if they're visiting you, they don't need, it's preaching to the choir, I guess. So in that respect, but yeah, I mean, I hope that these conversations can like develop an understanding and interest that can move the needle a little bit. But yeah, we will see. I think there seems to be some appetite for stopping pipelines and so on and so forth. But equally, you know, there's like a lot of pushback, which is very much what I'm interested in. Some of this recent work with tobacco, this strange idea of really just putting your head in the sand, making as much money as possible, and passing on that money to your children, I guess. But then for what? Because, you know, they will have, you know, the water won't be drinkable or whatever it is. You know, it's like it's a very it's a fascinating mindset to me, and obviously a deeply problematic one.
And Lee, do you see that also in the applications you're getting for
Yeah.
like in
I think we do. I think we see a more committed, serious stand on social justice, on climate change, on just more intense work these days. And so I think that's the work that's being made, and I think that's the work that's interesting. And we're trying to collect in a bunch of different areas, I would say. But yeah, I think young artists are working in this way, and I think old artists like me feel guilty if they don't. You know, if you feel bad if you can't make a statement almost, or try to add to the conversation in some way.
Mhm. Yeah, there's a lot of issues around. I think that there's certain, it's prompting some people in the good direction, because there is a little bit of space for uh, self-flagellation in the world of environment. I mean, I certainly do it to myself in terms of worrying. I'm much more cautious about developing a new body of work now, because I can't really ignore the materiality of the object I might make, or the technology I might need to buy. Uh, so I think in the past I would have perhaps been more free to maybe work on a larger scale, but now I'm actually quite drawn to working on a slightly more modest scale for that reason. Although video has this great, ability to be many sizes.
Well, thank you for these beautiful words at the end, and I will share my screen here and invite everybody to join us. Well, saying a couple of last words if you like, ask a question. Oh, we have one chat note, but please, as we are saying goodbye for this evening, and thank you everybody for coming and joining us for this conversation. I'm now a lot more hopeful that environmental art can change our viewpoints and make us think differently for the future. So this is also what we hope to do at the Schuylkill Center with our environmental art program, incite this curiosity that you bring with you, Rob. So I'm really grateful for your work in our gallery.
Thank you so much for inviting me, and to Lee for, I guess, introducing my work to you. So I feel very, very honored.
Well, and thank you again for everybody to join tonight. Please